Goa, India, 1596. A man arrives at the port in a state that leaves everyone who sees him speechless. He had been missing for 7 years. He managed to be rescued after 500 ducats were paid for him by order of Philip II. No one knows where he has been. No one knows how he survived. And the first thing he does as soon as he regains his strength is to ask for permission to return to the very place from which he has just been rescued. Who is this man, and what is there that is worth more than his own life? Maybe you've never heard of him. However, on his second voyage, he discovered one of the greatest mysteries that had pursued humanity for millennia. Although today almost all the credit is still given to the British. This is the story of Pedro Páez, missionary, explorer, and one of the most forgotten Spaniards in history. And I promise you that you've never been told this story before. So, who is this? Pedro Páez? He was born in a small town in Madrid, in Olmedo de las Fuentes, in 1564. Son of a noble family, a Jesuit from a young age, brilliant, and in 1587 he wrote a letter to his superiors asking to be sent on a mission. He wanted China, he wanted Japan, the ends of the world, the places where being a missionary could cost you your life. His superiors told him they wouldn't send him. To Ethiopia, to Ethiopia. Ethiopia to Ethiopia? The oldest Christian kingdom in the world, almost inaccessible, surrounded by Islam and desert. The Jesuit mission, which had been there for decades, was dying. Of the 5 missionaries sent, 3 were already dead. Páez set out from Lisbon in 1588. Note, from Lisbon, not from a Spanish port. In 1580, Philip II unified the crowns of Spain and Portugal. His empire controlled all the routes of the Indian Ocean. Goa, in India, was the main base of operations for that global empire. A Spaniard who wanted to reach East Africa had no other gateway. It took him 5 months to get there. He was ordained as a priest in January of 1589. And in February, he already set sail for Ethiopia with the Catalan Jesuit Antonio de Montserrat, but they did not arrive. The plan was to reach Muscat in Oman and from there find a ship to Somalia. A local merchant promised them passage. They set sail, but a few days after leaving the port, 2 pirate ships surrounded them on the high seas. They chained them up and accused them of spying for the Spanish crown and took them to Yemen. 7 years of captivity began. Imagine this, barefoot in chains crossing the scorching rocky canyons of Hadramaut, a region so deadly that in Arabic its name means the place that kills, and skirting the dunes of the Rub al-Khali, the largest desert in Arabia. Without water, without shade, surviving on grasshoppers to avoid dying, they displayed them before the great Ottoman rulers as if they were exotic animals. They were moved from city to city, sold, and ended up in Sana'a, the capital, rowing chained in the Turkish galleys at the port of Mocha. And here comes something you can't help but admire. During those 7 years, Pedro Páez learned Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, Armenian. He learned from the other missionary priests, from the guards, from the merchants who passed by. Each new language was a key, and he kept them all. On one of those days, at the court of the Yemeni Sultan, they were offered something to drink, a dark, hot, bitter infusion. The Arabs called it kagwa, made from the roasted seeds of the bun tree. Pedro Páez drank it and described it in his writings. It was the first time a European described coffee. News of his odyssey finally reached Spain. Philip II ordered to pay the ransom of 500 gold ducats for each one. As you know, they finally arrived in Goa in 1596, the day of Páez's death.
If God has kept me alive for 7 years in the galleys of Yemen, it's not so that I stay in Goa.
In 1603, Páez set sail again, this time alone and with a different strategy. He disguised himself as an Armenian merchant. Armenians were respected traders throughout the Islamic world. No one questioned them with the languages he had learned during captivity and with an appearance that no longer resembled that of a priest. Young, having left Lisbon, he crossed the trade routes of the Indian Ocean without anyone stopping him. He disembarked in Massawa in just a few weeks. He was finally in Ethiopia.
I have finally arrived in Ethiopia after so many years.
What Páez found in Ethiopia was a Christian kingdom of fascinating complexity, a millennia-old Orthodox church, emperors who ruled over dozens of different peoples. Páez only sought more knowledge. He learned Amharic, he learned Ge'ez, the sacred language of Ethiopian texts. He learned Ge'ez, consulted the royal archives, wrote the first grammar of Amharic and the first complete history of Ethiopia. And he converted 2 emperors to Catholicism. With the second Susenyos, he forged something that went beyond faith. They were advisor and king, Susenyos. He took him on all his campaigns. He wanted his opinion on everything. And Páez literally he designed stone palaces and churches, supervised the construction of the first stone bridge in Ethiopia over the Blue Nile Gorge in Alata. He wasn't a passive traveler. He was an architect, a diplomat, and a philologist at the same time. And on April 21, 1618, during one of those campaigns, about 100 kilometers south of Lake Tana, Susenyos pointed something out.
Páez, we are not outside the wheel. Do you agree with that?
Páez knew it the moment he saw it. The ground opens up, a spring gushes out from it. That spring feeds a stream. The stream feeds a river. The river grows for thousands of kilometers until it crosses half of Africa and dies in the Mediterranean. That spring is the source where the famous Blue Nile is born. For thousands of years, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans never knew where it was born. Pedro Páez knelt down and later wrote, almost in passing, in his diary, "I confess that I was glad to see what King Cyrus and his son Cambyses, Alexander the Great, and the famous Julius Caesar so longed to see in ancient times." That's all. A man who had survived 7 years of slavery, who had crossed the world on foot, who had learned 7 languages. He simply noted that he was glad. He documented everything in his 4-volume history of Ethiopia, precise geographical descriptions, dates, coordinates, verifiable. Pedro Páez died in Ethiopia on May 20, 1622, of malaria, at the age of 58-19, of which he spent in Ethiopia. 11 years after his death, the Jesuits were expelled from the country. His manuscripts remain buried in European archives that no one opened for generations. His History of Ethiopia was not fully published until 1905. And in that silence, in 1770, the Scottish explorer James Bruce arrived. He was ambitious, a good writer, and an excellent self-promoter. He traveled to Ethiopia, reached the sources of the Blue Nile, returned to London, and proclaimed before the Royal Geographical Society that he was the first. He published 5 volumes and became a national hero. Did Bruce know that Páez had been there 152 years earlier? Yes. The Jesuit documents existed and were known.
And what if it's true that he was at the source of the Blue Nile, Bruce's discovery?
He not only ignored them, he deliberately attacked them. In his writings, he labeled the Iberian Jesuits as lowly fanatics to protect his own reputation. Before an enlightened England, hungry for national heroes, and it worked for almost 2 centuries. The whole world believed that the sources of the Nile had been discovered by a Scotsman. That's exactly what the Black Legend does. It doesn't need to lie, it just needs to keep silent. If Pedro Páez had been born in London, would there be movies about him? Glorious statues. He was born in Almeida de las Fuentes and has a small plaque on the wall of a church. But history is already recognizing him. Ethiopian researchers know and respect him, and more people around the world know his name. And thanks to this video, you now know Pedro Páez, the discoverer of the source of the Blue Nile. If this story has touched you, share it. There are too many people who know the history and names of other countries and don't know their own.